Before we can truly talk about the units, you have to understand the wings. Now the wings, similar to what we see in Abbasid, but there are some slight differences. Ultra Wing, same. The decrease in cost can make for some very interesting pushes. However, I don't think it's going to be used as aggressively as we see in Abbasid. The other one that you can get from Culture Wing, so now you have two choices, is getting healers, which are quite nice because they can AoE heal, which is pretty amazing. We'll talk about them later. The Economic Wing doesn't give you cheap villagers, but it does give you free villagers, and it gives you chonky berry bushes. The Trade Wing, on the other hand, this is where we will get a little bit of a strange encounter, as you can buy units, you can buy villagers, but we'll talk about that soon. The Trade Wing is where you get these really strange encounters because you get these caravans that give you favorable exchanges. Now I see this being very tactical, and I can foresee that players are going to be using this quite often. You can get insanely cheap resources, or insanely cheap units, or even just a bunch of villagers for a bunch of gold. Now, there are other bonuses that you can look at. So for example, the advisors, they can attach to a building, making units a little bit more tanky. And Military Wing, of course, spawning military. However, this is military over time, which is going to make for some interesting plays in the late game, I can assume. And lastly, Master Smiths. Now, the blacksmith's damage and armor technologies become free and complete automatically when entering an age. Now, this is something I can imagine going wild when you're doing feudal pushes. I will most likely be focusing on this one, even though the others are also really nice. Now, let's get to the units. Barracks? Same. Nothing crazy happening over here. Now, looking at the units, this is where things get a little bit spicier. Now, you remember the camels from Abbasid? Well, camels here are dual wielding. They can hold a bow and they can hold a sword. So they are versatile and you can toggle between the two, which is amazing, especially depending on the situation where you might need to fight. But just like camels with Abbasid, they are weak to ranged units. Now, these guys are amazing at running around, poking your opponent, and I think we'll see a lot of them. As we can see, just like Abbasid, we also have camel lancers that only become available in castle. But I want you to notice, in both the archery range and the stable, we can make a desert raider. So you don't need to make one or the other to be able to make them. You just choose one and that's your comp. So you don't need to invest too much wood early on. Now, aside from that, nothing too fancy, but those are the very important ones. Now, what we're used to is seeing the usual lineup. Springalds, Mangonels, Manganique? So Manganique is slightly different because it launches fire. And we know what fire does. It has a lot of area, it has a lot of range, it goes everywhere. Now, this is very good against mass units, as we can see, but it is definitely going to be something that we're going to struggle splitting against. My favorite unit in the game is the Tower of the Sultan. Quite expensive, but it's literally a walking tower that shoots stuff, and it is a ram as well. So imagine you put a ram and a tower together, you know, you got ram, you got tower, Tower of the Sultan. And that, ladies and gentlemen, should be the units of Ayyubid. And anything that is new and fancy should be clear, I believe.